going on, everybody? I'm back. Welcome to Trail Tales. My name is Kyle O'Grady, and this is the podcast where I, a thru-hiker, peak bagger, and all-around just hiking enthusiast, big old hiking nerd, chat with other hiking nerds just like myself about their experiences on the trail. Now, this week's guest is a woman by the name of Sarah Williams. She's a total badass. She hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2017, and she's also done a bunch of other cool stuff like bike rides and marathons and a ton of cool adventures. And she also has her own podcast called the Tough Girl Podcast, and her own site, her own blog and YouTube channel called Tough Girl Challenges. I had so much fun with this one. We talk about a bunch of cool stuff. We do talk quite a bit about what it's like to run a podcast and kind of be a content creator. It does stray a little bit from the usual theme of like through hiking and all that stuff, but I think it's really good stuff, and I really enjoyed it. And of course, we still do talk about her Appalachian Trail hike quite a bit as well, particularly about what it's like to hike the AT as somebody who is not from the United States, and some of the logistics that you have to deal with to come here and do a through hike, things like insurance, visas, and all that stuff. So that was really great as well. Sarah is just so professional and hardworking, I guess, when it comes to all this stuff. So I really learned a lot from her, honestly. We chatted a little bit after we were done the recording, and she kind of gave me some advice and some pointers for Trail Tales as well. So that was really, really amazing. Sarah, when you hear this, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. We're going to get into our conversation in just a second here, but first, let me say a couple things. I know you're about to hit that skip button. Don't do it. I'm going to guilt trip you into listening to me here. The first thing is, well, if you're a regular listener, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way here. Last week's episode sucked because I didn't actually post an episode last week. I apologize. I've committed to doing these podcasts once per week, and I've stuck with that except for 2 weeks, last week, obviously, and then Christmas week, way back when I didn't post that week as well, just because I was visiting family and stuff. It was Christmas. So I'm sorry about that. I still plan on doing one per week. I hate to say it, but sometimes I'm going to have to skip a week here and there. I have a full-time job. I have a couple friends. I have a life. I'm going to start going hiking now that it's warming up here in Vermont. So yeah, I'm still going to do one a week. Don't worry. I'm just assuring you right now, but I'm sorry. Yeah, that's that. Next thing I want to say is that you can contact me. Let's say you really liked this episode. Let's say you have a suggestion for a guest, maybe somebody that I can't reach out to on Instagram or social media. Somebody who's a little more under the radar that you think would be a good guest for the show. I'd love to hear from you. You can write me on Instagram at Trail Tales Pod. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter is the same thing, at Trail Tales Pod. Facebook is just Trail Tales. You just type that shit into the search bar and hopefully you'll find it. My email is gmail.com at trailtalespod. No, that's not it. It's trailtalespod at gmail.com. Wow, I'm going to leave that in there. So yeah, send me an email. Let me know what you think, and I would really, really appreciate that. The Boston Bruins are about to play Game 7 against the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round of the playoffs, and I have about a half an hour to finish this introduction and post the episode so I can go watch that. So I'm going to try to wrap it up here. The last thing I want to say real quick is I would appreciate it if you checked out the Trail Tales Patreon. $5 or $10 a month you can pledge, and you will get a bonus episode and a blooper reel each month. I think I'm going to start to do some more stuff on there as well. I only have 3 Patreon supporters right now. Shout out to Nick, Matt, and Scott. Thank you guys very much. And I encourage people to go check it out. Patreon.com/trailtales. All the money goes right back into the show. And, I put quite a bit of work in this, so please check that out. We actually kind of talk about this a little bit in the episode. Sarah kind of talks about her Patreon and how that has helped her continue to produce content for Tough Girl Challenges. And I think that's all I have to say. Let's get into the episode. Actually, no, I have one more thing. I'm going hiking next week. I'm going to hike the Foothills Trail, hopefully, assuming I'm successful. And I can't wait. Okay, let's do it. Episode number 25 with Sarah Williams from the Tough Girl Podcast, Appalachian Trail Class 2017. That's it. We're doing it. Episode number 25 of Trail Tales. Today I'm joined by Sarah Williams. Now, this is a little bit of a first for Trail Tales because Sarah is the first non-American guest that I've had on the show so far. Sarah is from the United Kingdom. Sarah, where exactly are you from?
So I'm from a little tiny town called Hoylake, which is in the northwest of England, but most people would know it. The closest big city would be Liverpool, so where the Beatles come from. That's what I normally say. So if you know, Liverpool, the Beatles. I live by the beach, by the coast.
Nice. I've never been over there before. I really want to. Honestly, I've never even been to any other country besides Canada, but that doesn't really count because I live like less than an hour from the Canadian border. So honestly, I've never really been overseas at all, but I'd really like to make it over to the UK as well. So Sarah hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2017, correct?
Correct, yeah.
2017, and she's also done a bunch of really cool stuff, and she has her own podcast called the Tough Girl Podcast. She has a whole blog and all that stuff. And we're gonna talk all about that in a second, but I'm hoping by the end of this conversation she can kind of give me some advice on how to make Trail Tales a little bit better. Maybe start by not having like 3 beers before your every single conversation, so you stumble over all your words and all that stuff. But no. So Sarah, anyways, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, I'm so excited to be here. It's always good to talk about the Appalachian Trail.
Absolutely. So why don't we start there? So a question that I always like to ask my guests at the beginning of our conversations is kind of how they learned about the AT in long distance hiking and all that stuff. But I'm especially curious to ask you this question because you're not from the United States. You know, it's one thing for someone like me who's lived in Vermont, literally a state that the AT goes through my entire life. So obviously I'm going to know about the AT, but you know, you live across the pond, like way, way far away. So how did you first learn about the Appalachian Trail?
The amazing world of the internet. But to be honest, like, it's one of those things, like, I never even knew that hiking trails existed of, you know, like 2,200 miles. It was sort of basically blew my mind when I found out about it. But I started thinking back in like 2015, you know, what big challenges do I want to undertake? What's something super fun and super amazing? And I remember stumbling across the Appalachian Trail and just thought, this is just insane. Like, people walk for 2,200 miles. Through 14 states. What an incredible journey that must be. And then I remember going onto YouTube, and I think it was Dixie. So I don't know if you've heard of Dixie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Dixie's sort of this total legend, and I followed her journey back in 2015 on YouTube, and then eventually got her on the podcast to talk more about it. And, you know, we've spoken to her since about some of the hikes that she's done, like the PCT and the Continental Trail Divide. And I think a seed just got planted where I thought, you know, maybe one day I'll get to do that. Maybe one day I'll get to go over to America and thru-hike. What an amazing challenge, what an amazing opportunity. So I just basically stumbled across it through things like Pinterest and Google and just searching for, you know, big, amazing challenges and trails to find.
How long between the time that you kind of learned about what the AT was, you know, watching these YouTube videos, you know, looking on social media and seeing other people do this, how long between the time when you discovered the AT and kind of what it was and the time that you actually decided that this is something I want to do? I want to, you know, pack up my shit and I want to go to another country and walk for 5-6 months. I guess it was a lot less than that for your case, but, you know, for most people, why did you actually want to go and do this, I guess is what I'm asking here.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'll give you a little bit of the backstory. So I'll do it very, very quickly. But
Go for it.
Well, I had the full-time corporate job. I was working in London. I had the city job working in banking, working, you know, ridiculous, crazy hours from, you know, 6 a.m. all the way through to 11 o'clock at night, highly stressed in my 30s. And I thought, you know, there's got to be more to life than this. Ended up leaving my job in March 2013, taking 18 months out to go traveling and basically to find out, you know, hold on. What do I want to do with my life? How do I want to spend my time? Went and climbed Kilimanjaro, went and backpacked in South America, spent time in Australia. And it was during that time I thought, hold on, what do I actually want to do? And for me, I figured out actually the things that I'm really passionate about are adventure, travel, challenging myself, pushing myself both physically and mentally, doing things which make me feel uncomfortable, and also just sort of proving that girls can go out there and just do anything. And I'm a very girly girl, and so I think sometimes it shocks people when they meet me and they hear some about the different challenges that I've done. So I combined it all together and I started Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring other women and girls to go after their own adventures and step outside their comfort zone and travel and explore. And I thought I needed basically a big challenge to launch it with. And I actually started with something called the Marathon des Sables, which is when you run 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara Desert, carrying everything, carrying everything you need on your back, which is a pretty crazy challenge to do. And I did that in 2016. But I basically trained for 18 months to do this 1-week challenge in Morocco. And then it was done and it was over. And it was like, hold on, I love doing that challenge. I love being out there in the desert, in the heat, in the sand, and being self-sufficient and carrying everything that I needed on my back and moving on from place to place. And so after 2016, I knew that the next challenge that I wanted to do was something that was going to be a longer physical challenge that would really, really stretch me. So one of the things that we haven't mentioned is the time frame that I did it in. So I actually did the trail in 100 days. So
which is amazing. That's I think I did it in like 140 days, and like I honestly can't imagine doing it any faster. That's super awesome for sure.
I was going to say, like, honestly, like no comparisons. I think that's the key thing with the Appalachian Trail, and we'll probably come on to, to discuss that. It's hike your own hike, do what works best for you. But with regards to the time frame and what I could fit in, 100 days sort of worked for me. And I also knew, and this is, when you've done really big physical challenges like the Marathon des Sables and climbing Kilimanjaro and backpacking solo and doing a lot of traveling before, I knew that I'd be able to go out and I would be able to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail in 5 or 6 months, and that wouldn't challenge me. And that's not being arrogant, that's just sort of saying that for me that wouldn't have been a big physical challenge. It would still be a challenge, but for me to really get outside my comfort zone, I needed something a little bit more challenging. And I was going back to university to go back to do my master's in October, and I also running my business, having a podcast. I needed to preload content while I was away. And I heard about another guy who did the trail. So I think he did it in 2016, Bigfoot, who did it in 100 days. And I thought, oh, well, he's done 100 days, so I can totally do it in 100 days. That's not a problem. And the idea just came, and then suddenly it was 2017, and it was, right, let's thru-hike the Appalachian Trail, 100 days, let's finish on my birthday. I'm not a massive fan of my birthday, so I thought we'll finish on that, then at least I'll be able to have a big celebration for another reason. And that's basically how it came about. So really, I found out about it in 2015 when I was sort of researching, what are the challenges that I want to do, like especially with Tough Girl Challenges. 2016 did Marathon des Sables. 2017 decided to do the Appalachian Trail.
Nice. So let's kind of back this up for a second. So I'm honestly very curious about why you kind of decided to start this Tough Girl Challenges thing in the first place. And I don't just mean the actual content. By that, I mean this whole concept of challenging yourself and doing these adventures, as you kind of put it a few minutes ago there. Why did that come about? I know you mentioned you were kind of working like the corporate job beforehand, and, you got kind of sick of that, couldn't picture yourself doing that for the rest of your life. Can you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit more, kind of what was going through your head there? And did you have like any sort of reservations about kind of making that leap, I guess?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of things. So I worked in a very, very male-dominated environment, and I did see, a lot of sexism and inequalities. And I've always been sort of very confident, very outgoing, and a lot of the women that were not in my space, but I saw other women who maybe struggled with that. They struggled with their own internal self-confidence, and I just couldn't understand it. And for me, what I linked that back to is the fact that when I was 18, I headed off on a gap year and went traveling for 6 months in Southeast Asia. So I've always had this internal self-belief in me and what I can do. And I link it back to sports and adventure and challenging myself and learning from it. And it was just basically combining that together. And I used to do work for UN Women, and I was on the London committee. And so motivating, inspiring women and girls has always been a passion of mine. And when I finished work, to be honest, I actually felt really lost. I didn't really have any idea of what I wanted to do. I didn't know what my purpose was meant to be. I also felt like a massive failure. You know, here I am, I've got this great degree, I've done 8-9 years, I've got this fantastic career, I got promoted the year before, everything was going in the right direction, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't happy with what I was doing, especially when everybody around me is looking at me as though I'm such a success, and I'm just so miserable. And I just knew it just wasn't the right thing.
So sorry to kind of cut you off there, but like, did you kind of leave that arena of work before you actually had kind of started Tough Girl Challenges?
Yes. So I left in March 2013, and I honestly, I mean, I had savings, so I was I was in a good financial position. I knew that I didn't need to work for about 18 months.
Okay.
So I had time to figure this out. And to be honest, I didn't know if I wanted to go back into the corporate world. I didn't know if I wanted to go and do charity work. I didn't know, gosh, should I move to like Singapore? Do I want to move to New York? Like, where do I want to go and what do I want to do? I just didn't know, to be honest. And I think getting the time away and spending time over in South America was fantastic, because one of the ways that you travel over there is by buses. So sometimes you're getting on these buses for 18, 20 hours at a time. And I would just have a journal and, this piece of paper and a pen, and I would just sit there and write. And I don't know, all sort of thoughts came out, some feeling came out. And it was amazing to be away from, friends and family, and also society and people who knew me and had expectations of me. So I managed to get this peace and quiet to really, really think, hold on, what do I want to do? What are my passions? What are my interests? Not what other people think I should be doing, and not what I think I owe other people. Actually, hold on, what do I want to do? And that's where the idea started. And to be honest, it's really not easy to do something like this, to start something off. It took me maybe 6 months from having the idea to finding the name, to getting the brand design, to design. I designed the website by myself, and then suddenly going live, because my first thought was, well, hold on, what are people going to think of me? What are my friends and family going to think about me? What are my old colleagues going to think? I've gone from working in banking to suddenly now, she's detailing herself, or she wants to be this adventurer and this motivational speaker, and she wants to write books and do these amazing challenges. So who does she think she is? And I think that can really that's really difficult, because you've really got to have that inner self-belief in what you're doing. And I massively struggled with it, to be honest, for a while. And for a long time, I felt like a bit of a fake and a bit of a fraud. Who am I doing this? And especially with doing something like the Marathon des Sables, which is a very well-known foot race. It's known as the toughest foot race in the world. And a lot of incredibly sort of famous people have done it. It's almost like an adventurer tick list. To do the Marathon des Sables it's very well regarded. And it gave me a sort of a lot of gravitas and kudos from doing it. But I initially started with blogging and writing, and I thought that's how I'm going to make my impact and help to change the world. And nobody read my blog, and that's obviously quite a shock and a little brutal on the ego. But I also started going into girls' schools as well to give motivational talks, because I wanted to improve my public speaking, give something back, and to be able to practice. And I remember coming back from a couple of these speaking gigs that I'd done with these young girls aged 15 and 16. And we talk about their goals and their plans for the future. And many of them would say to me that they wanted to be a WAG, which in England is basically to be the wife and girlfriend of a footballer. So it'd be the equivalent of girls wanting to grow up to marry like an NFL star or basketball player or something. And I was just really heartbroken, to be honest. I thought, oh my goodness, you are placing that your only value is in how you look, nothing else that you achieve. It's just purely on the physical and on the outside. And I came home and I was a little bit despondent. I remember sitting at the kitchen table and I had this newspaper in front of me, and I always go to the back pages first. I don't know why. And as I was looking through the sports pages, I was just like, hold on, where are all the women? There was just no women there. And I like to think that, that I'm educated and I'm smart, I know stuff. And I thought, hold on, if I can't even find the female role models in sports, and I don't even know what's happening in like the adventure community, how are these young women and girls growing up going to know that actually they can become professional footballers? They can get out there and climb Mount Everest or swim the English Channel or sail around the world and do these incredible things which loads of women have done, but nobody's heard about them. And I had a great friend who said, start a podcast. It's an incredible way to get those women's voices out. And I was like, I am not technical. I've got no skills in this arena. I don't know what I'm doing at all. And But do you know what? Nobody really, I don't think, has a clue when they first started.
Oh,
My
no.
first 4 episodes.
I certainly didn't, and would still argue that I don't to this day. So understood there.
I'm still learning as well. I mean, I was going to say on my first 4 episodes, I don't even introduce myself. Like I'm literally like, oh hey, today we're going to be speaking to da da da.
That's so funny because when I recorded my my introduction episode, so it wasn't an actual guest episode. It was just like the episode 0, like introduction to Trail Tales. I did it in one take, and I just kind of explained like, okay, I'm going to do this podcast about hiking, and then at the end, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Kyle O'Grady, by the way. So that's so funny.
But I think it's an amazing thing that you can do that, because then your audience can also grow with you. I mean, I cringe when I listen back to some of my earlier episodes, because I actually wrote out this whole like speech and I read it like, hello, my name is Sarah Williams. I'm from the UK. I like this, and my favorite color is pink. And it's just, oh my God, it's just horrendous. But actually, the only way for you to get better at doing something is to actually do it.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, just... with the Tough Girl podcast, it's been listened to in 174 countries. It's had over 750,000 downloads. It's
nice.
Top 17% of podcasts globally. It won a national award last year, beating out companies like Sky Sports, the BBC, Manchester City in a public vote. And that's obviously, that's absolutely huge. But it all started from one idea, exactly where you are, that one idea for your podcast, what you're wanting to do, and being committed and focused. That actually you release episodes every single week, and it's an amazing thing to do. And your audience will grow with you. The content's going to be evergreen. Anybody who ever wants to hike the Appalachian Trail will hopefully find your podcast and be like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm going to learn so many awesome skills.
Absolutely. No, that's kind of encouraging to hear, that you kind of felt like you didn't really know what you were doing at the beginning either. And I feel like I've definitely gotten a little bit better. Maybe not on this episode because I've had a couple beers, but like most of the time I feel like I've done a little bit better since I started. But I still kind of feel like I don't quite know exactly what I'm doing. I still get a little bit, not really nervous, but just kind of like, I'm just going to say nervous. I feel like that doesn't exactly describe it, but I still get a little bit nervous before my episodes, I guess. Usually once we start talking, like now it's fine, but like, I don't know, how long did it take you before you kind of really settled into the whole podcast content creation thing, and how long until you kind of started to see like a good response from people who were listening?
So, do you know, it takes longer than you think. And I think the first thing which I found the strangest was, I don't know if you had this, you probably did, is when you go back to edit your first podcast and you hear your voice and you're just like, no, I do not sound like that at all. Or you watch yourself on videos and vlogs and you're just like, oh my God, I've got a double chin, and what is with my skin, and oh, why did I say that? And you'll also notice that you'll say certain words. So like my words are always like awesome, so, and you hear them, you repeat
like,
it, and you just...
I say way too much. Oh my God.
Exactly. But I think it does just take time. I mean, it took me 6 months to get to like 25,000 downloads, and now I do that every single month. So
wow.
It's quite strange how quickly a podcast can go, especially when people find it. And, I'm a one-woman show. I have no marketing budget. So it's purely like the power of word of mouth and how much time I can spend on social media trying to promote it and get the stories out there. And obviously, the more episodes that you do, the more that people will share, with the women that I interview, they'll share them with their audience, and there'll be cross collaborations. And, hopefully, the women and the men listening to your podcast will come and they can listen to my podcast. And I'll obviously talk about your podcast on my podcast, and then hopefully send people back to you to listen to your guests. So I think it's an incredibly powerful medium, and I think I love the fact that people have been on this journey with me, and they've also get to know me as well as I go through the different challenges. I actually started a daily podcast when I came back from actually all throughout 2017 actually. So before I headed off on my Appalachian Trail hike, I started basically sharing what I was doing every day, because I think what people forget is that they can see the end of a challenge. So they see that you've thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail in 100 days, and they think, oh, well, it's easy for her. But actually, one of the things that I do is that I share, well, how did I plan it? How did I organize it? How did I preload my content? How did I finance it? How did I pay for it? How did I balance my time? What did I need to organize? What did I need to do to get ready in order for me to get to that point that I could go on this hike and go on this trail? Because that's, I think, sometimes what people don't know how to do. When there's a big challenge or a big goal, people can get scared and overwhelmed and think, well, how do I even approach this? Like, the Appalachian Trail, when you look at it in its entirety, 2,200 miles, 14 states, what gear do you need? What shoes? And it can be overwhelming. And so I think that's been incredibly powerful to show people, look, this is where I started. This is what I did to save up money. This is how I paid for things piecemeal as I went along. These are the costs. And these are the challenges. And, and I definitely had like ups and downs, like trying to figure stuff out and, what's going to work best for me and how do you even train for it? How do you get fit for it? So I was actually able to share that with all of my followers and really take them on the whole journey. And I did actually vlog the whole trail as well. So I filmed it all every single day, apart from day 98, I think. I lost the footage, or I don't know where that footage is gone. So, there's pretty much 99 days of footage, apart from like one of the final days.
I thought about like, for a very hot second, I thought about doing like some sort of vlog when I set out for my thru hike. But at the end of the day, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to like actually do this whole trail, let alone like try to commit to filming and like editing a video for like every single day. So I kind of threw that out the window. I apologize if anybody listening to this is like, Kyle, you're not talking directly about hiking right now like you have been on all the other episodes, but honestly, Sarah, you're the first like other podcaster I've talked to. I've talked to other content creators, mostly just thru hikers that did vlogs. Obviously, you've been doing the whole podcast and content creation thing for a while, so I'm just kind of curious, what has been like the hardest part about putting out consistent content like that? Because I mean, kind of going back to what we were talking about before we started recording here, most people quit. At least for a podcast, most people quit after like 6 episodes or something like that. And you've been doing it for a number of years now. So, what have been some of the challenges related to that?
To be honest, lack of money, like not being paid for your content and people not necessarily appreciating the work that goes into what you're producing. So trying to earn a living through content creation, so through blogging, through podcasting, through video and social media as well, being an influencer, it is incredibly hard. And I think a lot of people think that it's really easy. And I actually had to write a blog post because people were getting the wrong idea, and all my fault about what I was posting on social media. There's me at the gym, going out for a walk and training, or going to schools, or doing what I was doing to prepare for the hike. And I think I've been doing it for over 2 years. I was going into debt for producing the content. It costs you money to have a website. It costs you money to have a hosting platform. It costs you money to run your podcast through Audacity. Well, it costs me money to having a search function. There's costs involved, as well as the cost of your time, for example. And when you first start out, editing podcast, it would take me 5 or 6 hours to edit. Same with videos, 5 or 6 hours to edit a video for 6-7 minutes. And I put my heart and soul in it. And when I was 35, I moved back in with my parents. So, so it's like one of my lines like last year was like, look, I'm 36 years old. I live at home with my parents. And basically, I wrote this blog post saying, look, this is how I afford to blog and podcast. As in, I'm very minimalist. I don't shop. I don't go out. I don't socialize. When I get invited to Hendy's, I have to decline and say no because I can't afford it. When I get invited to go for drinks on a Friday night, I have to say no because I can't afford it. And I'd rather spend my money on investing that back into Tough Girl Challenges. So for over 2.5 years, I was going into debt for doing the work that I was really, really passionate about doing. And don't get me wrong, that was a choice of mine to invest my time and energy into what I'm doing. And then so that's tough to keep motivated when you're putting out content over and over again, and it's being valued because people email you telling you how you've changed their life,
right?
But it hasn't changed their life enough that they would donate $2 or $5. But actually, what happened with me is, have you heard of Patreon?
I do, yes, and everybody should go check it out. There's my shameless plug.
Yeah. No, but I mean, Patreon is life-changing and massively life-changing for me. So I started Patreon, I think, in like 2016. And so when I was actually out on the trail, I was getting $500 a month in, which allowed me which allowed me to fund the running costs of the podcast and the hosting fees, and give me enough for for food and stuff while I was on the trail. I mean, it didn't cover the full cost. You can see the costs on my website as I go through, because it is about $1,000 per month, as everybody probably knows. But once I started getting regular support and started getting a regular income coming in, that was the game changer for me, because then it started giving me more opportunities. Because at one point, last year, I was doing the podcast, doing the blog, doing the website. I was back at university studying for my master's. I was working 2 part-time jobs, and I was just burning myself out trying to build a brand, to build a business, to make my passion work, and to be able to make a living from my passion, which isn't always possible, because if you're not earning any income, then all you've got is an expensive hobby. And I know what I'm doing is valuable, so that's probably the hardest thing, is when sometimes you feel as though you're not appreciated, or what you're doing isn't making a difference. But you have to be patient. It's like when you're on the Appalachian Trail, you've got to be patient, especially you're going to have bad days. You're going to have these days when it's rained for constantly, and you've slipped in the mud and you've fallen over and you've got a blister, or you've dropped your Snickers bar in the mud and you still have to pick it up and eat it, or you can't find any water. You have these tough, challenging days, but you get through them. You keep going, you keep persevering. And I think that comes back to 2 key things. One is that you've got a goal. So you know what your end goal is. You want to get to the end of the Appalachian Trail. You want to get to Mount Katahdin. You want to touch that sign. And for me, it's the same with my business, as in, my goal is to increase the amount of female role models in the media. That is my mission. That is what I'm working towards. And that comes back to every question that I ask myself. If by me doing these adventures and challenges, is this going to encourage other women to get out there, to get fit and active? And the answer is always going to be yes. So by me being able to share what life was like daily on the Appalachian Trail, hopefully it'll encourage other women to think, okay, I need to prepare for the bad days. Okay, that's what Sarah did with regards to mental resilience and mental toughness. I mean, I also interviewed about 30 or 40 other women out on the trail for the YouTube channel, literally just asking them 3 or 4 questions. What's your name? What's your trail name? Where are you from? What are you doing out here? What's your top tip? What's your biggest challenge that you face and overcome? And these women are just all different ages, all different backgrounds. You had women who were through hiking. You had women who were section hiking. I met a group of women who are in their 60s who've been doing the Appalachian Trail over 12 years. Another woman who every year she'd come and she'd take 2 weeks off work and do a 2-week section. And section by section, she was getting it done. And the fact that everyone was different ages, everyone had different equipment, different gear, everyone had faced different challenges, I think is incredibly empowering, because you can look at other women and say, well, she's just like me. Oh, she's a teacher. Oh, she's in her 50s. She's in her 60s. Oh, she's 18. Oh, wow. Okay, so she's traveling by herself. Or, oh, okay, so she's traveling with a partner. Oh, she's traveling with her family. And then they can start to think, oh, okay, well, if she can do it, I can do it. So it's very, very powerful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we kind of just briefly there touched on some of the hardships of being a content creator like that, the financial aspect, the grind, if you will, of just, putting out consistent content, for a long period of time. And then you kind of got into some of the more positive things there. Can you just elaborate a little bit more about that? How often are people reaching out to you, talking about how you've inspired them? Have you ever had somebody in person, come up to you and say, hey, look, I'm a fan, something, things like that, because as an aspiring content creator like that, being able to kind of influence people like that and inspire people, I guess, is something that I think about a lot and something that I would hopefully like to do eventually. So can you just kind of talk about some of the more positive aspects of that, I guess?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to put a damper on it, because actually what I do, it's a choice of mine. I'm incredibly passionate about it. And I love my life. I know that I'm a massive success, because how I judge success is me having freedom of choice over my day, how I spend my time, doing what I do, literally loving my life and being able to live life, under my own choices. But I've had, really random places. I was cycling down Pacific Coast Highway, and we were at the state park, and I was just chatting, talking about, because I was going off to cycle down in Baja, California, and this guy was like, hold on, are you Sarah Williams? And I was like, yes. That was very true. It's like, oh my God, I follow you on Instagram. It's like having these random chats. And then it's really nice. I had another guy who actually, he was following my journey along the Appalachian Trail. And I can't remember his name, but he came out specifically because he knew the area that I was going to be in with a Snickers bar, because I'm a little bit obsessed with Snickers. I don't know any hikers who can't be obsessed with Snickers.
I was going to say, yeah.
Best bit of kit for hiking.
Absolutely.
And he came out and met me and just said how much he enjoyed the videos. I mean, it's a great problem to have. It's just at the moment there's so many social media platforms, so I get lots of messages on Instagram, Facebook, direct emails from people, because people trust me, because I've been in their head for 2 or 3 years now, and I share it all. Like I share the high points, I share the low points, I share real life. They get to see us behind the scenes, especially on Instagram stories. It's like, guys, I haven't gotten out of bed yet. I'm in my pajamas. I've been in pajamas all day. I haven't brushed my teeth. I haven't had a shower. I woke up at 6:30 this morning. I just grabbed my laptop from the floor and started work. And people do share. I mean, scary emails that you get when, Sarah, you've really, really inspired me. I've quit my job. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I started? But then they go on to explain, my big passion is doing this. And actually, I want to head off and go and do that. So this is what I'm going to do. And because of you, I've decided to follow that dream. I've had many women, even just recently, I had a meetup and I met this lady who said, "Oh, Sarah, you've changed my life. I was really struggling with depression and not having purpose." And I listened to one of your episodes, and it just resonated with me so much that actually I want to go off and do this walk. So she's heading off to Spain to do a big walk in Spain.
Nice.
And sometimes you can forget the power that you can have in somebody else's life, and even just tiny words that maybe resonate with people, just words or phrases which stick in their mind, and that's incredibly powerful. I do have sometimes I have harder situations when people share things which have happened in their personal life and that they're struggling with, and sometimes that can be very emotionally draining, because I don't necessarily have the skills or the expertise to help them, and all I can do is provide support. So I do actually have like a closed Facebook community for listeners of the Tough Girl podcast called the Tough Girl Tribe, if they're a patron, and I do what I can to support my listeners. I wish I could do more, but at the end of the day, it is just me.
Right.
But many people, when they do email, they just email saying, "I just wanted to tell you this. You don't need to reply to me." It can be incredible. It can be life-changing.
Absolutely.
Like it really, really can. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, kind of going back on what I said a minute ago about, wanting to kind of inspire people. I mean, I definitely want to do that, but this show, Trail Tales, is also a little bit more casual than your show, I feel like. I mean, obviously your show is kind of based on, inspiring, particularly females, obviously, to get out there and adventure and do their thing. And I feel like this show is more just kind of for like a casual passing the time kind of thing. But that being said, 2 or 3 years ago, 2016, it was, my friend and I, Sebastian was his name. We set out to thru-hike the Long Trail, and we created a Snapchat account for our hike before we left. And I just kind of posted it a couple places on the internet, mostly on Reddit, honestly, and which is how we got connected, which is great. But I just kind of posted it around there, and I was like, "Hey, people, we're gonna go do this like 270-mile hike, and you can add us if you want to follow along and all that stuff." And I feel like it kind of got out there to a lot of people who weren't like super aware of like the whole thru-hiking thing, and we didn't have like a huge audience for this. We probably had like 500 people maybe following us on Snapchat, but at the end, after we finished the trail, we snapped the whole thing. It was all great, had a lot of fun. I had a number of people, like a surprising number of people, reach out to me and say like, "Hey, look, like I didn't even know what this whole hiking long distance backpacking thing was, and you guys have kind of inspired me to go out and do like a thru-hike or get into the outdoors or whatever." And that was something that was like super like touching for me, honestly, because like that's not really what I intended to do when I started. And I don't know, that just kind of, that little story there popped into my head while you were talking about that there. I think that's so incredible. But
I was going to say, like, even you're saying like 500 isn't massive numbers. I think that's huge, because those are 500 people who are engaged with what you're doing. They are your true fans. And actually, I also know there's a lot of people who actually, they can't go out, they can't go and thru-hike, they can't give up 5 or 6 months of their life. They may have family, mortgages, debt. They may have other stuff going on, so they can't take that time off, or they don't have the ability to. But actually what they can do is they can live through you sharing those stories and get that enjoyment and follow along with the highs and the lows and feel involved with it. And I think that's an amazing thing to do, because that's a great thing to do.
Absolutely. And honestly, I don't know if I would have ever had the desire to start this podcast if it wasn't for that little Snapchat experiment. And get this, I even got recognized on my thru-hike one time from a guy who was like, "Hey, are you the guy that did that long trail hike on Snapchat?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." And it was awesome. Thank you for following, which is hilarious because, like I said, again, 500 people isn't like a huge amount of people by any means, but I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny. Sarah, this is awesome. I love talking about the whole like podcast content creation thing. As probably some of my listeners know, as I've talked to other like content creator guests. That being said, I do kind of want to transition into the topic of doing a thru-hike of the AT as somebody who's not an American, right? So this honestly isn't something I've thought about like a ton for obvious reasons, because I'm an American and I've never even been overseas like we talked about earlier. But it is something I'm kind of curious about, I'm curious about hearing your story, kind of dealing with some of those logistics. Now, I do have some listeners from the UK, not a ton, but I know there is somebody listening to this from the UK right now. So hopefully you guys can kind of find this valuable, and for everybody else, hopefully it's just kind of interesting and you're curious about it like I am. So first of all, I gotta ask, so even here in America, even here in Vermont, a state that the AT literally goes through, there's still a lot of people that have never really heard of it, and maybe they've heard of it, but they don't actually know anything about it. So I'm just kind of curious, what was the reaction, among your friends and family when you first told them you were going to go do this crazy thru-hike over in America?
I think they already know that I'm slightly crazy, so they obviously didn't think it was the best idea. Like, my friends and family are supportive, but initially, my family love me so much. They actually really don't like me going away doing these challenges. They do worry about me. But most people were supportive, but I don't think I necessarily explained it in the correct way. So we've got this little tiny trail. It's called like the Wirral Way, which is about sort of 20 miles, and it's flat and stuff. And I basically explained to my parents, it's basically the equivalent of the Wirral Way. It just goes on for like 2,000 plus miles, not really explaining, it's the equivalent of going up and down Mount Everest, like 16 and a half times, and talking through like the White Mountains and the different sections and what it was going to be like. So it was hard to really explain. And I still think it is difficult to explain for people who don't necessarily know or understand. But yeah, I think people were interested, and I think that, they were supportive and encouraging and wanted me to follow my dreams and go after it.
Had they ever heard about the AT or through hiking or long distance hiking in general, before you told them what you were going to go do?
My friends in like my female friends in like the adventure world, as I call it, pretty much all of them have heard of it, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, that's absolutely amazing, go for it." Other people who aren't in that world hadn't really heard about it, so it was good, obviously, to be able to educate them as well. But I also think that maybe I was a little naive as well about what I was going to do, and I actually didn't think it was going to be as tough as it was.
Oh, really? Okay.
To do it in the 100 days, like, I sort of knew it would be challenging, but I remember talking to my sister saying, yeah, well, hopefully I'll make really good progress and I'll be ahead of schedule. I'll be able to like maybe stop off in New York for like a couple of days, just catch the train in, have a bit of time in New York, and then still be able to come back and carry on the trail. I quickly realized that wasn't going to be an option. And actually, that all I was going to be doing for 3 months was walking every single day. So I think it also shocked them towards the end as well, because I got one of my biggest challenges with regards to like my weight and trying to consume calories. So I'm very fit, I'm very strong. I lift, I go to the gym on a regular basis, and I put on like a stone in weight before I started. so I started the Appalachian Trail, like on my videos, like I don't look how I normally look. I'm like really quite chubby, especially right around the face, and I get to my normal weight around like the 50-day mark. But then after another 50 days of doing this intense hiking, I'd lost like another stone in weight, and I was really very, very skeletal. And I'm like 5'9", so very, very tall. And I was like like size 8 pants were like falling down. My hip bones were sticking out by like 1.5 inches. And my sister and my mum met me at the end of the trail. We met up in Boston. I think they were just so shocked at like how fragile I looked. And I think a lot of people, especially towards the end, were starting to get very, very worried about me because they could see how gaunt I was getting. And everyone's like, you need to eat more food. And you're literally like, I cannot eat any more food.
I literally have to carry all the food that I eat, and you only have so much space in your food bag. So,
and all I do, honestly, all I do is eat constantly. I just can't. Literally, I'm just burning so many calories. I can't consume enough. So, sorry, I've gone off track now.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Honestly, that is something that's kind of interesting. I had a guest on, one of my buddies named Mullet Mike. I think it was episode 4, so like a long time ago now, where he kind of talked about that, and he had made it all the way from Springer to, I want to say it was like, it was like the town before
Damascus?
Monson. So like,
before the 100-mile wilderness.
Yeah, like a little bit before there. So almost the entire way. I think he had less than like 200 miles to go or something. He made it over 2,000 miles. And he had to stop because he was like getting sick just from the fact that he'd lost so much weight and just wasn't eating properly. So that is definitely a real concern for people who are through hiking, and it's tough to give advice on that too, because I feel like it's so different for everybody. Like, I lost like 15 pounds when I first started, and then by the time I finished, I had pretty much almost gained everything back, which doesn't make any sense at all, but like, I don't know, it's just so personal, I guess.
It is, and it can come down so, well, you've probably seen it as well, like a lot of women will burn off the fat and replace it with muscle, whereas a lot of men will like burn through their fat and start burning through the muscle. So you have, I think that you must have heard the phrase, like, women will end up in like Qatar and looking like goddesses, and the men will look like war veterans or something, like just skeletal, and it's difficult to consume that much protein.
It is,
and stuff. Yeah. I was going to say, you came back asking about and I don't think I answered it, about the challenges of being international. And I'd say there's 3 things that you have to think about if you're an international wanting to do the Appalachian Trail. For me, it was sorting out a visa, it was getting my flights booked, and it was also having insurance while I was out there. And the visa situation, I actually went to the US Embassy and was actually quite nervous about, are they going to let me in? Will they give me a visa? And they did. And they actually gave me like, a 10-year visa, which was fantastic. So that means that when I can come in, I get 6 months at a time, which is great because my second biggest audience is America. Then after that, once I knew I got my visa, which I got in January 2017, I knew that it was on. And then it all became very real for me when I set up like an alert to find like cheap flights to Atlanta, and it popped up for like £220. Yeah. And I was like, right, I have to buy this. And so suddenly I bought my flight, and then I had the same alert set up from, on the way home, and I planned with my mum and my sister for them to come out to Boston, and we'd fly home in September, book my flight home. And I think once you get your flights booked, you're like, oh my goodness, here we go. And obviously, the third thing is insurance, just because unfortunately in America you don't have the free healthcare like I'm used to over in the UK. So getting the insurance covered and making sure it's the correct insurance, like those are the three big things basically. And then for me, it was just a case of figuring out, well, how do I get from the airport to the hostel that I need to go to, and then the hostel will then drive me to the start line, and then it was a case of good to go.
Right.
Like anything, it's just breaking it down and taking it one step at a time.
Right. Why don't we talk about some of those aspects a little bit more detailed, I guess. So specifically the visa. Now, I'm going to be straight up. Like I said, I've never traveled outside the country. I don't know jack shit about like visas or traveling, obviously from the American side of things, let alone from, traveling to America from another country. So what was it like kind of securing a visa for like I guess you kind of knew it was going to be 100 days that you were going to do your hike, but like for a long period of time like that to kind of travel in the States?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as complicated as you think it is. I think it can be quite a scary process, but obviously you've got to remember, I'm coming from the UK as well. There's going to be certain countries which will struggle a lot more to be able to get visas. It also depends on like your background. I think you've got to have like a certain amount of money in the bank. You've got to have, you've got to have something that you're coming home towards. It is intimidating to go down to London, queue up outside the US Embassy. There is obviously like lots of security going in, lots lots of waiting. You flow through, you end up having taking all your paperwork in, you end up having like a face-to-face interview with somebody, and they sort of ask you all these questions about what you're going to do. And I remember I was like chatting with the guy, and he actually had my website up in front of him, and I was like, oh my God,
wow.
this is so weird.
Holy shit.
But one of the things that I hadn't told him, I just said, oh, I'm just going to hike the Appalachian Trail, but I hadn't told him that I'm doing it in 100 days. And I had this like big thing across my website, basically saying, oh, I need to do it in, my goal is to do it in like 100 days, and just didn't mention that fact, because I was just obviously hoping that they would give me this, this 6-month visa.
Right.
But even then, that could have been, if I wasn't doing it in 100 days, it would have been pushed. It would have been a close call to get it done within the 6 months. But I think it just comes down to research, and Google is your friend, and it's just being methodical, and just figuring out, look, how much is it going to cost you? What do you need to get done? Right? Is your passport in date? How long do you have left on your passport? Because when you travel, you normally need longer than 6 months. Do you have sufficient pages available, etc.? Mm-hmm. But once you've got that tick in the box, it's then relatively simple to book your flights and to come over, go through the immigration. And it's like, why have you come to why have you come to the United States? Oh, I'm going to be through hiking the Appalachian Trail. And they sort of look at you like, really?
Like, okay, yeah.
Yep, I don't think that's going to be happening.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that you kind of mentioned a second ago was the insurance thing, right? So again, like, I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about this topic at all. So I guess, how did your experience kind of dealing with that go? And, what advice would you give for people who aren't Americans that want to come to the States to thru hike the AT or the PCT or any other thru hike like that?
Yeah, I think insurance is a must for anybody if you're coming from a different country over to America, because if you do get collected by an ambulance, or if you go into the emergency room or something happens and you don't have insurance, the costs are going to be absolutely astronomical, and it's honestly just not worth it. And having that peace of mind, searching out an insurance company, finding one that works for you, paying the £100, £150, whatever it is totally worth it. Because if something had gone wrong, or say even I've fallen over or damaged my tooth or something, yeah, or twist my ankle or broken my leg, and I need to have that done or fixed or anything, touch wood, you need to, yeah. I'm a really sensible person. I know people who do stuff like without having insurance, and that's absolutely fine. That's your own personal choice. But I think it's just, when you're going to America, you don't want to end up bankrupting yourself if you do get ill or injured. So that's one of the key things that I do, especially when I'm planning with regards to my costs and my budget. Things like that I include in as a must, basically. And it's about finding one which suits for you. So I had an insurance company I used for the Marathon des Sables, because some of these events that you do, or challenges that you do, can be very specific. So, depending on the height or how high you're going up, like how far you're going, how many states you're crossing over, or if you're going to different countries as well. So even getting insurance for my latest challenge was really challenging, because I was starting in Canada, going through America to Mexico, then to Australia, and then on to India. So trying to get insurance in multiple countries over a 7-month time period can be difficult.
Yeah. I can imagine.
But it can be done. But also, you just got to put in the work. You just got to do your research, and again, find out what happens for you, especially if you've got any like pre-existing medical conditions, and you've just got to be truthful on your insurance form. I have heard horror stories of people who haven't been truthful, and things happen, and the insurance company isn't going to pay out. So, be honest, get insurance, budget it in. It's super, super, super important to do, especially if you're not an American.
Absolutely. So I guess my last question on the whole, not being from America and doing a thru hike topic is just, is there any other piece of advice or topic that you kind of want to touch on related to, somebody coming to the States to do a thru hike like this that maybe as an American I haven't really thought about?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know, because I've spent quite a lot of time in America. So have you heard of Camp America and the American summer camps? So every summer for like 3 years, I'd come over and work in different states.
Oh,
so
nice.
I've worked in, I've worked in like California, I've worked in Michigan, I've worked in Maine before. So I don't know if I'm very, very used to spending time in America. And obviously, I know like the differences in language, like, trash and sidewalk and
wait, sidewalk? What's wrong with sidewalk? What do you guys call it there?
Pavement,
like,
or like candy. crisps or chips, and all these different words. So I sort of know all that. I mean, for me, I just find the people are amazing. Like, the kindness of strangers that I've met over there has been awesome. And like all of the Americans I've met, I think bar like maybe 4 or 5, have been super friendly, super nice. And couldn't have done more for me, especially like the trail angels that I met over on the trail. Absolutely amazing. I think it's also a bit of a novelty when you're over there being a Brit or having an accent, and every time you go shopping, it's like, oh my God, are you from England? Do you know the Queen? Which is quite fun. Although a lot of people did actually think I was Australian, which was very strange. I do spend a lot of time in Australia.
I could see that, honestly, just as like someone who's not super familiar with like other accents. I mean, at this point I understand like the difference between the accents, but like maybe if you had asked me that like 6 years ago, I might have been one of those people making that mistake too, unfortunately.
Oh no, don't worry, it's all fine. But I think people are really impressed that you've traveled so far to come and do a trail or a walk in their backyard.
There is a right answer to this, by the way. What was your favorite state on the Appalachian Trail?
Vermont.
Correct. Well done. You win the prize.
Woo!
Oh, that's so great. All right, what was your actual favorite state?
Where are the White Mountains? Well, I can't remember which state are the White Mountains in.
New Hampshire.
Do you know what? In New Hampshire, the White Mountains, it was tough. It was brutal. It was so hard. But at the same time, it was so stunning. It was so beautiful. That I really, really enjoyed that. But I think all the states do have their pros and cons. Like even Virginia, I think it was like seeing the horses. I like the quick little states as well. The ones that you're throwing like 50 miles, boom, you've crossed the state. Absolutely. That's great. I had great memories in New Jersey and New York. I managed to meet quite a few of my listeners and patrons who reached out to me. So yeah, like I've just sort of got good memories throughout all the states. Yeah, but the White Mountains particularly, if I was to come back, I'd love to do like the Presidential Range again. I'd love to spend more time up in the White Mountains. Like that was beautiful for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did an episode probably about a month ago now, maybe a little bit longer, where me and actually Mullet Mike again, who I talked about earlier, we just ranked the states on the AT from like least best to best, and I believe I put New Hampshire as number one. I think I put New Hampshire as number one, if I recall correctly. So I love the Whites. I've hiked there a bunch beyond just my thru-hike as well, because like I said, I'm pretty close here in Vermont, so that is awesome. All right, so Sarah, at the end of these episodes, I always like to ask my guests to share just a couple, or maybe just one or two, whatever, stories from their thru-hikes. So I'm talking the kind of stories that you would share around a campfire if you had somebody kind of picking your brain about your thru-hike, and just your go-to stories, I guess. So with that said, I'm going to pass the ball to you, and what do you got for us today?
Well, it's going to be a bit disgusting. So all my like campfire stories normally have to do with like bodily fluids.
That is fine. A couple episodes ago, I had a guest talk about how his ball sack was really, really chafed and bleeding. Oh. So I mean, maybe you'll be able to top that. I don't know, but don't worry about that. Let's hear what you got.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, there's also a video to match this as well. So if you want to go watch like day number 97 on the vlog, then you'll probably enjoy it. But it was one of those days, it'd been raining all day, and I'm talking miserable, drenching rain. And I'd hiked all day. I finally got to the shelter. I got to the shelter, and I was suddenly like, oh, I don't feel very well. Like, this is not good. So I got into my dry clothes. I only had one set of dry clothes, one set of, my sleeping clothes. Got into my dry clothes, got into my sleeping bag, and I sat up, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. And then I was like, crap, I'm also going to shit myself. And I was like, oh, what do I do? So I just remember I was getting out of my sleep, and I was, when you get warm and cozy and snug, and you're just ready to go to sleep, and then suddenly you're like, oh no, my stomach's going, hello, we've definitely consumed something. And I remember having to unzip my sleeping bag, and I was like, do I take my clothes off? So I took like a couple of my layers off. I went outside. I'm trying to pull my pants down because stuff was starting to come out. And then I was also trying to lean over and be sick. And I don't know if you've ever tried to do this when it's happening at both ends, and trying not to get like anything on me. And it was and I was getting wet. It was just horrendous. And I can still remember it now. And I was just, Anyway, finished the business both ends, got back into my sleeping bag, a little bit damp, but sort of okay. Honestly, not joking, about 20 minutes later, it was like, oh my God, it's happening again.
Oh,
so
no.
I spent the whole night getting up to either be sick or to have those, I'm going to go really graphic, those like watery poos. Well, it's just like not like it's just like water coming out. I obviously had some bad water, even though like I thought I filtered it, but maybe I didn't filter it.
It wasn't like norovirus or anything. I guess you're at the end of your thru hike there, so
I was at the very end. I don't think it was, because it was just that final day. So day 98, I didn't eat. I couldn't even stomach any food, and I was having to bash out like 30 miles. So it was just absolutely brutal. But it does make me laugh now, and it's really funny because people watch the videos or watch the vlogs, and I did this short 6-minute film of the whole of the Appalachian Trail. But a lot of the stuff I include is like the crying sections, because that's generally what people liked watching on YouTube. Is they like seeing people alone, upset, crying, and sorry, well, I'm going off topic. But what was I saying? So that's one of my classic stories. So I always bring that one up just because it makes me laugh so much when I go back and watch it now. I'm just like, what an absolute state you were in.
Oh, man.
But another amazing story is that I had this girl who she listened to the Adventure Sports podcast and heard about what I'd done with Marathon des Sables. She started listening to the Tough Girl podcast. Her name's Becca. She found out that I was through hiking Appalachian Trail. She reached out, wanted to meet me. So the challenging bit was trying to find like a date and a time that I could fit to. And so I scheduled, like, we'll meet at Klingman's Dome, so like, the highest point in the AT, and I'll definitely be there by this date. And it was the biggest push and slog ever to even get there. And it was, torrential rain coming down. Becca had been waiting there for 6 hours
She
for
waited.
me.
Wow.
She waited, and we got there, and we were then going to meet up in like the next town and stuff. And I felt awful because it's when it's like pissing down with rain, and you can only read, because if like when you stop walking, you get cold.
Yeah.
So I could only basically spend 5 minutes, and this is awful. I could only spend basically like 5 minutes with her before I was like, I'm really sorry, because my body was starting to convulse and shake before having to carry on to get to the next shelter, which was meant to be like 2 miles away. Ended up, I was actually hiking with a guy at this point. I can't remember his name. But we ended up like night hiking, getting to the shelter at like 10 o'clock at night. But it was still, even though it was really tough, like doing the night hiking, being soaking wet, it was amazing. It was an amazing, to meet somebody who wanted to meet me and had waited like 6+ hours. And I felt awful. I was like, oh my God, I just feel absolutely terrible. And she bought me like Snickers bars and, loads of little gifts and presents and stuff. But we ended up meeting in the next town, and she came over, and we managed to spend a bit of time together and have lunch. So that was super nice. But like the Appalachian Trail, it's just it's a beautiful way of life. It's amazing getting back to nature. It's the amazing people that you get to meet along the way. I think one of the things that I missed out on was maybe like not having a trail family. I experienced it for like a little bit when I ended up hiking with like 4 or 5 people for maybe 4 or 5 days, just because they were going at a similar pace to me. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, normally, I'd come into, I actually had to stop talking about the speed that I was doing it at, because it was making people start to feel really bad about themselves. so I'd come into the shelter, and initially at the beginning, people would be like, oh, where are you coming from? What are you doing? And I'd explain, and they would just be like, oh my God, wow. And then asking you loads of questions, which is amazing. I'm more than happy to talk. Obviously, I like talking.
Right.
But then you just realize, like, hold on, they got in at 2 o'clock. I'm getting in at 8 o'clock, and I'm knackered. I actually don't have the energy to talk to people. I just need to sleep and start resting and recovering. And towards the end, like, people would say, oh, where have you come from? And you name this campsite. And they'd be like, oh, but we were there 3 days ago, because they were doing like, 10, 11 miles a day, and I was doing like 33 miles in a day. And it just started to make people feel bad, and I never want to do that anyway. So in the end, you just start sort of not really mentioning it unless they specifically ask and specifically want to know. But you can't really explain like how amazing the Appalachian Trail is, and just how incredible and how blessed and how fortunate I feel to have been able to hike it and to walk it and to see it and to experience the kindness of strangers and to see the stunning views and to just to complete it and to finish the goal and everything. It's obviously I'm very passionate about it, so I want to encourage more people to get out there and do it.
Absolutely. So Sarah, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up here. Don't hang up quite yet, because I do have a couple more questions, but just thank you so much for taking the time to come on here today. Thank you for bearing with me with the technical difficulties we had yesterday, and thank you for actually like reaching out and, you know, kind of asking to be a guest in the first place, because you know, that's kind of how it happened, and I just really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about the Appalachian Trail.
Awesome. So for those that are listening that haven't, that aren't familiar with your content and your podcast, obviously, where can they go to kind of check your stuff out?
Best place to go is toughgirlchallenges.com. It's the website. It gives you more information about me, the Tough Girl podcast, the Tough Girl blog. I've also written a number of books as well about climbing Kilimanjaro, about running the Marathon des Sables, and about working as a chalet host, a bit random. So you can check the books out. There's lots of show notes on there. So there's lots of advice and tips about different challenges around the world. Women who've climbed, mountains like Mount Everest or done the 7 summits. Other women who've thru-hiked different trails, who've cycled around the world, or walking the length of the world, or unicycling around the world, and kayaking and canoeing and running and triathlons and Ironman. There's over 200 interviews, so there is a lot of content on there, but it's really nice. I think it's really nice to go and explore, but toughgirlchallenges.com is the best place to go.
Awesome. So everybody go check it out. Sarah, my last question is, it's very simple, okay? What's next? Don't tell me you did all this stuff, you're producing all this content, and then that's just it. What's next? What's your next adventure?
Great question, but it's probably the timing. So I've actually just come back from 7 months of traveling. So in September, in August last year, I handed in my master's, which was on adventure, women and fear. So 20,000 words had been written, boxed off, completed my master's, and in September I flew to Canada. Went to a bike shop, bought a bike, and then I cycled down Pacific Coast Highway all the way down to San Diego, then crossed over the border at Tecate, did a little bit of off-road cycling in Baja, California, and then got back onto the main road and cycled down the one in Mexico to Cabo San Lucas. I then flew to Australia to spend 2 months in Melbourne because I've got family over there, so had Christmas, New Year, etc. there, which was gorgeous, and then flew back home via India, where I spent a month doing a yoga teacher training course. So I'm now like a qualified yoga instructor, and I got back to the UK only a couple of weeks ago. But to be honest, like, my body's pretty battered at the moment, so I've got like my glutes aren't firing. I've got a little problem with like my knees and my shoulders, so I'm a little bit banged up, and so I've also lost like a lot of my strength and my muscle. So for me, it's just a lot of basically rehab. So it sounds really boring, but it's going to the gym, sorting out my glutes and my knees, also just getting back on top of the podcast and the blog and everything. So last year, a lot of my time was spent doing my masters, etc., and preparing for the big cycle challenge. So I don't really have any big plans. I mean, to be honest, I do want to do Pacific Crest Trail. I think that will just be phenomenal.
Yeah.
I do want to be a Triple Crowner. I want to get the Triple Crown and hike all of the big 3 trails. And as I've said, my second largest audience is America. I love spending time in America. And I just think it'd be nice, I've walked from Springer Mountain all the way up to Mount Katahdin. I then cycled down Pacific Coast Highway. So it'd be amazing to walk then from Mexico back up to Canada.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then to hike from Canada back to Mexico or something. So I have lots of big challenges and big goals and things I want to achieve and do, but nothing in the immediate future. So a bit of time probably in the UK, maybe looking at some of the trails in the UK, because we've got our own sort of system of national trails. So there's about sort of 17, 18 national trails. And in 2020, actually, they're opening up the coastal footpath, which goes all the way around England.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's going to be pretty amazing as well. So I may stay closer to home, but who knows what opportunities are going to present themselves.
Absolutely. That sounds awesome. And I think we're going to end it here. Sarah, thank you so much. Don't hang up quite yet, but to everybody listening, thank you as well. If you are a first-time listener, please go check out the show on Instagram at TrailTalesPod, or send me an email talking shit or giving me praise, trailtalespod@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Sarah, have a good one.